So in part 2, I will go to the broader questions that I identified, which is an inquiry, or rather the questions I've dealt with in part 1 are the inquiry into how the investigations, the prosecution were conducted. Here I want to go into the broader questions. The key question is whether the case was handled differently because of the status of the complainant, or if there has been any improper influence. Really, if I were to put it this way, did LML in any way influence these proceedings, or was the case investigated and prosecuted in accordance with the rules like any other case? And I've said it earlier, and I'll reiterate. I can be categorical. There was no influence by LML. It was treated as any other theft case and handled accordingly. We have checked with the IOs, their supervisor, the DPPs, and their director. They have confirmed this. There was no pressure or influence exerted on them by LML or anyone acting on his behalf, and they handled this case as they have handled other theft cases. I'll now deal with the police. I have set out how the police handled the matter when they took into and what they took into account. It was dealt with by the IOs. Decisions were taken by them together with the immediate supervisor. Case didn't come to the attention of the senior management, either at the police or in my ministry. No one senior has spoken with or been influenced by LML or any of the Liews on this case. Meaning, as I said, it was dealt with by the IOs and the immediate supervisor, and no one beyond that. No one lobbied or exerted pressure either on the IOs or on the supervisor or on anyone in a position to influence the investigations. Turning to AGC, I have explained how the matter was dealt with by AGC. It was dealt with by DPPs and cleared at the level of a director. Again, neither LML nor anyone acting for them approached AGC or had any contact with AGC in this case. AGC dealt with police. There have been some questions asked, specific to the Attorney General, that he was on the board of directors of Capital Land between 20th of November 2000 and 2nd of January 2006, when LML was the president and CEO. As a result, did AG in any way influence the proceedings? The answer is no. AG didn't know of these investigations or proceedings until the case went for trial. There is a further point. AG resigned from the Capital Land Board with effect from 2nd of January 2006. He resigned because he had a difference of viewpoints with LML on some issues. When AGC conducted its internal review on this matter, AG recused himself. AG felt that given the history of differences he has had with LML, the perception of fairness may be affected if AG oversaw the review. Thus, AG had nothing to do with this case at any stage. The case was conducted by the state courts in open court in accordance with the rules. This case is in fact an illustration of how the rule of law applies. A foreign domestic worker is charged, the High Court acquits her, the complainant is a wealthy, powerful person, but all are equal before the law. It doesn't matter who the parties are. Justice according to the facts and the law as the courts see it. We may agree or disagree with the state courts or high courts' decisions and conclusions, but that's a different matter. At the systemic level, if you look at it at a systemic level, at the highest level, you talk about the criminal justice system. We have the police who investigate in accordance with a legal framework for police investigations. AGC make the charging decision based on available evidence and public interest. The trial courts consider the sufficiency of the evidence and the legal issues. The appellate courts review the decision of the trial court. The case shows that the criminal justice system as a whole works. If you drill down to the next level, we have systems. For example, these would comprise investigative protocols, SOPs for how the police and the DPPs operate. I have mentioned some errors that were made. We have to try and strengthen the systems at that level, try and prevent reoccurrence. I've also mentioned the challenges. Besides these levels to the system, there will always be the risk of mistakes by individuals. These lapses will have to be dealt with. So, the rule of law, the idea of rule of law, is central to us, to our ideas of fairness, equality, and justice. It is even more important in the current zeitgeist that is sweeping through countries. Societies around the world are grappling with debates on inequality, a sense that the elite are creaming off most of the economic benefits and bending the rules and systems to their advantage, and in the process buying off, suborning those in government. People are fed up with unfair structures, equal opportunities are drying up. Singapore, we are not in the same situation. Our active intervention in socio-economic issues has helped most people to benefit. But our people know we must jealously guard the availability of equal opportunities. We must ensure that everyone has a fair shake. We must be alert, guard against the wealthy and the powerful taking unfair advantages. If a significant section of our people feel that the system favors some or that it's unfairly stacked against them, then Singapore will lose its cohesion and it can't succeed. Thus, it is essential that we have a fair system, that we have a clean system, that we have a system that gives opportunities to all. These are our fundamental concerns. If LML did unfairly influence the proceedings, then it will be a hit to our foundations, and it will be a hit to our sense of fairness, equality, and justice, and a dent to Project Singapore itself, because Singapore is built on these ideals. We have always been jealous about guarding against such corrosion. It does not mean that there will be no abuse of power and no corruption, but when it happens, swift, decisive action must be taken. Members will know successive governments have been clear about this. There has to be a ruthless intensity in upholding integrity. Mr. Lee Kuan Yew set the tone. The case of Mr. Teh Cheang Wan is a prime example of the approach. He was one of the most senior members in Mr. Lee Kuan Yew's cabinet, but when corruption allegations surfaced, Mr. Lee directed the CPIB to conduct investigations. Mr. Teh was placed on leave of absence. He ultimately chose to end his life rather than face trial or corruption charges, which the AGC had then yet to settle. Mr. Lee said at that time, and I quote, "There is no way a minister can avoid investigations and a trial if there is evidence to support one." These were the values of our founding generation, and these are and have to be our continuing values. They have been scrupulously stressed and adhered to by the two succeeding prime ministers. They are like religious commandments. There cannot be any compromise. When there is a breach, action is taken, will be taken. Let me refer to some cases. In 2012, you had Peter Lim, Commissioner of SCDF. In fact, he was Commissioner of SCDF when I was Minister of Home Affairs too, convicted of corruption charges for receiving sexual favors with 3 different women, sentenced to 6 months imprisonment, dismissed from public service following disciplinary proceedings. 2013, you had Mr. Edwin Yeo, Assistant Director of CPIB, misappropriating money, jailed for 10 years for CBT as a public servant and forgery. In 2007, you had Mr. T.T. Durai, CEO of the National Kidney Foundation, convicted for corruption, sentenced to imprisonment, appeal to the High Court, dismissed. In 2012, you had Mr. Howard Shaw, then Executive Director of the Singapore Environment Council, convicted for obtaining commercial sex with minors, had asked for a nominal fine based on testimonials of his good character and social standing. Court found no exceptional circumstances, 12 weeks imprisonment. Sentence was to provide a strong deterrent to others. Peter Lim was a senior home team officer. In many countries, his actions would not have attracted criminal punishment. In most countries, commissioners of SEDF, assistant directors of CPIB are pretty much untouchable, but not in Singapore. The message is, doesn't matter who you are, if you do wrong, action will be taken.